Kia ora and welcome into the Kiwi Football Fix here on Sky Sport. What we do here is we shine a spotlight on New Zealand football, all things either here or abroad. And today we go to Australia to talk to an Englishman who's had a very big part to play in, I suppose what you'd say, recent New Zealand football history. His name is Des Buckingham. He's the current assistant coach at Melbourne City. Des, it's great to see you on the Football Fix, mate. Thanks so much for your time.
No, pleasure to talk with you again, Goran.
Des, an amazing first season with Melbourne City. You arrived there September last year. On Sunday, you claimed the Premier's plate. What is it about this side that has just clicked this year and gone into overdrive?
I think it's probably a few things. It's the consistency of the playing group. The club were able to retain a large core of the group from last year that were relatively successful making the grand final and just missing out on winning that grand final. And the only staff change, they've kept all the staff. The only staff change has been me, with Eric Monbert's moving on and Patrick, who was the assistant last year, becoming head coach. So there's been a lot of consistency in both the playing group and the staff group. And it's been a case of just adding a couple of layers and adding different things, players as well, into the new group. And I think that familiarity and especially the playing style, you start to see some real relationships and combinations that have certainly been exciting to watch from the sideline. And yes, we've gone on to achieve something that the club never has before, which is to win the league. Yeah,
your very first Premier's plate. Look, be honest with us. How hard did you celebrate on that Sunday evening? Because when you turned up against Brisbane Roar on Tuesday, you could have done the Wellington Phoenix a massive favour by drilling them. You went down 3-0. So what were the celebrations like on Sunday?
The celebrations were okay. We had a couple of beers, but nothing too drastic because we were in Brisbane. We literally had the day off the next day, and then we travelled to Brisbane on the Monday. So it's very much about trying to save up those moments for the end of the season while still trying to enjoy them in the moment, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I certainly got a few messages from people back in Wellington after the result, just reminding me that we could have done a favour for them. So yeah, apologies.
Well, it's okay. We're doing all right on our own, with a game back in Wellington and obviously beating Wanderers last night. I think we're shaping up okay for the playoffs. But we'll keep talking about Melbourne City, though, because you guys have had an incredible season. In terms of goal-scoring ability, you've been wonderful. 55 goals, 15 more than second-place Western Sydney Wanderers, if I can put it in that manner. Why have you been so lethal, so clinical in front of goal?
I think it's a combination of the players work extremely hard. They work extremely hard out of possession, firstly, to try and win the ball as high up the field as we can. And that puts us in goal-scoring positions quite quickly when we do win the ball back. And then it's been about the ability of the players that we have in that final third. And, our front three, or front five, if you like, the combination play that they've been able to demonstrate on a consistent basis this season has been excellent. We've got Jamie McLaren, who's hit, I think, 25 goals, but the combination of Craig Noon, Andy Naboo, young Marco Tilio, Stefan Kolakowski when he's come on, and then we've got the 10s that back them up in Connor Metcalf, who's had a fantastic season with Adrian Luna and Florent Berenguer. So very good individual players, but the two key ingredients, I think, have been the hard work from those players to get into positions firstly, and then it's the technical ability and their understanding of where they need to be able to execute what people are seeing on the TV. So
what are your expectations for the playoffs? You've finished top of the table. That is guaranteed. In terms of the playoffs, who are you keeping a close eye on in terms of the opposition? And do you think that you are odds-on favourites to win this?
I think it's difficult to keep an eye on one particular team at the moment. I think there's three or 4 points that separate the remainder, second through to sixth. So, the good thing is, because games are being played pretty much every day at the moment, you're across most teams and across them quite deeply in terms of the detail that you've got on them. So, whoever we do get in the semi-final, we'll be ready for. In terms of favourites, I wouldn't say so. I think we've seen consistently this year that anyone can beat anyone in this league, and especially with some changes for some of those teams coming up, our focus is very much on the semi-final and making sure we position ourselves as best we can to firstly perform, which will hopefully then give us the result to progress further.
Yeah, and then to put a cat amongst the pigeons, so to speak, we've been keeping a close eye on relations with Australia since the travel bubble opened up last month. And then we're hearing news about new COVID cases and community transmission. And I believe that Melbourne, Victoria, they're going into a 7-day snap lockdown to try and stamp this out. So you're dealing with that and also trying to close out the regular season with games against Newcastle Jets, Melbourne Victory in the Melbourne Derby. So what does the rest of the season look like for you guys now? And is it easy enough to travel and get together as a team?
Yeah, well, literally, we got put into lockdown just over an hour ago now. So we're 7-day lockdown from now. I don't know what that actually means for us yet. I'm waiting to hear. All I've heard is what the Premier has said, which is that the games or sporting events can take place, but it'll be without crowds. So I'm hoping that's the case for us in the A-League. But yeah, I'm waiting to find out more information on that at the moment.
Look, obviously the vast majority of New Zealand football fans will know you from your work with some of the age group sides, but most notably the Wellington Phoenix, when yourself and Chris Greenacre took over after, I think it was Erling Merrick, he left after the first 8 games of an A-League season back in 2016-17. You must keep a close eye on your former side still. What did you think, first of all, about their return home? They've been away for 433 days, Des, and then they finally get back home. They play in front of 24,105 fans. It must have filled your heart with joy.
There's still a piece of my heart in New Zealand, and Wellington certainly got a large slice of that. And when I watched that game on the TV from where I'm speaking to you from now, which is home, it actually sent tingles down my spine. You wanted to be there. That's the only simple thing I can say. To see that many people turn up and fill the Westpac for a team that sacrificed so much, both personally or individually and collectively, to achieve what they have done so far, and also to allow this league to continue in the manner it has. To see that many people turn up in Wellington on a beautiful day, and to go on and perform and get the result and play the way they did, it was you couldn't have scripted it any better. And I hope that they continue to push for that finals place. And I'm sure I'm hearing there's a big turnout in Auckland as well for when they get up there to play Perth this weekend. Just
on the Knicks, you keeping a close eye on them. How have you found their progression throughout the course of the season? They're leaving their playoff run a little bit late, but they've been putting out some pretty decent efforts on the paddock.
Yeah, I've been impressed. I think when you factor in, there's a lot of reasons or excuses that could be used for them to not perform or for them to not have a successful season, whatever you define success as being. Being away from home, being away from partners, friends, everything that they know. So for them to, I think especially the last 9 or 10 games, to not only pick up the results they have and the points that they have, but some of the football they're playing. If you're coming into finals football, they've left their run. You say late. I say if they pick up the next couple of wins, they could be well placed coming into finals football and well positioned as a form team coming in, which is what you look for when you go into finals football. So yes, it's exciting to see the push that they're making. And again, there'll certainly be a team that I'll be keeping an eye on as we head into that semi-final, should we get there.
There's some of the young guys that you've actually had a lot of history with. They are the ones driving this Wellington Phoenix side. I'm talking about the likes of Clayton Lewis sitting deep in midfield and Ben Waine, who's scoring plenty of goals up front. That must make you feel pretty good as well.
No, it does. I keep in regular contact sort of weekly or every couple of weeks with most of those players from the age group sides, and have done since I've been in Melbourne. That's important to me, the connection and everything that was built with those players and those teams. That's something that will stay with me for life. And I actually caught up with those players when they were over here after the game, properly, so away from the game. And it was nice just to connect with them again and see how they're going, how they're tracking. And to see them performing. I think Clayton's played every game, and Ben Waine is now not only playing but scoring goals. It's really nice to see.
What do you say in those conversations? Because you're not their coach any longer. So are you telling them where they're falling down or doing well with their positional play or technically? Like, what do you actually talk about when you catch up with some of those old players?
Funnily enough, most of it's not football. A lot of it's just general catch-up around them, how they're going. Probably more so to do with life in general, as crazy as that sounds. And then there's a little bit of football sprinkled in there, but it's not my place to tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing. They've got a coach that does that. But no, just general catch-ups and probably just storytelling on some of the experiences that we've been fortunate to share together.
Right. Can you share any of those stories? Like any of them sort of PG or... Are they able to be broadcast? I don't know.
I had Ben Wayne after the Wellington game, and we just spoke around how nice it is to see him progress in the way he has done, and that for me started back when he was a late runner into our under-20s World Cup squad. He was actually the youngest player there by 3 years, and not only was he the youngest, but he actually started our first game against Honduras, which I think was 2 years ago, nearly to the day. And so he started in front of his peers as the youngest player in the group, but not only started, but performed. And he scored 2 goals and got an assist, and then went on to perform against Norway and played in Colombia. So he actually became a starter in that 20s, or that successful 20s group, and then got his Phoenix contract off the back of that. So it's those kind of stories that are nice to go back and look back on.
Yeah, you've mentioned the 20s in Poland 2 years ago, so let's talk about that now, if you don't mind. I mean, you were in charge of a really wonderful group of young New Zealanders coming through that are quickly becoming household names. The likes of Sarpreet Singh, Joe Bell, Libby Kakache, who's gone on to Belgium. Just take us back to that time and the expectation that you had on this group to do what they did at that tournament, because they won games in the group stage and they progressed to the round of 16, and we haven't seen that before.
Yeah, it was. We knew we had some good players with us, but the reality was only 3 of the 21-man squad were professional or signed on professional contracts. When we're going into a competition where every other team and players that we face are all professionals and working in different environments compared to what we certainly had. And we knew we were probably under-resourced and under-financed compared to a lot of the other countries that we were going into. So putting it into context, rather than focus on that, what we did was look at the previous competitions, when New Zealand had gone at under 20 level, and we'd only actually won 2 games in 10 years as a country at those events. We'd always been outpossessed, we'd always been outpassed, we'd always been outshot, and we'd always been outscored. So what we wanted to try and do, or what we did, was put together sort of two to 3 weeks worth of a training camp, and actually we worked with the players to build something that people ended up seeing on the TV, which was a playing style, which was a different way and a positive way of playing that allowed those players both individually to showcase their own abilities, which then they're not only just able to compete, they can actually go and beat some of the world's best players in those positions. But it also allowed them to really showcase themselves within a team environment. And some of the football that we played was an absolute pleasure to watch from the sideline. And yeah, to go out on a penalty shootout to Colombia in the round of 16 was heartbreaking, because I truly believe that we could have gone a lot deeper into that tournament.
Yeah, some of the football that you played was just breathtaking. And I suppose maybe in the past, New Zealand football sides have been guilty of playing within themselves and playing conservative football. But what you're telling us today is you were empowering them to believe in themselves and realise that they could foot it with these other people on the pitch. They were as good as, if not better, than their opposition.
Yeah, I didn't want to go to a World Cup and try not to lose games. I truly believe that we had the players within the room. And what we had done, which was a large part, which I haven't mentioned, is we truly built and developed an identity built around Maori and Indigenous practice, which was truly unique to New Zealand, that other countries just couldn't access, that really brought this group of players together and give us a real deeper sense of meaning and greater sense than self. And that played a huge role in bringing together those performances that you see on the pitch and allowed players to really share and come together, because we had 21 players from 9 different environments. So to get those players, going towards a similar direction, that played a huge role in that. And that was, for me, the biggest key of the whole thing.
How difficult was that for you as an Englishman coming into a New Zealand environment and plugging into a culture that maybe you didn't have the experience in?
I was helped hugely by a guy called Christian Penny from High Performance Sport New Zealand. And I leant back on the fact that I'd been in New Zealand for 2.5 years in Wellington prior to coming back to take up the national roles. And I'm also aware that English coaches around the world can have a bit of a reputation as to, I'm from England, I know what I'm talking about, listen to me. And I think it's important when you're a visitor or a guest in someone else's country, you take time to understand the landscape, the culture, the people, and the football landscape in this instance. So I'd had that in 2.5 years coming in. So with the support of Christian, and then with the support of others, and we had players in our group that had true experiences of this, we tried to leverage a lot of that and see if we could actually integrate it into a sporting context. And that was the key. It was actually being guided and almost a facilitator rather than the leader in that specific environment that really allowed the impact to be had.
I need to mention that Norway game because on one hand, you've got a future superstar of the game in Erling Haaland, and you've got to try and shut him down. And then Gianni Stensness provides I don't even know how to describe that goal. I watched it again this morning, and it is like a tracer bullet from nowhere to score that goal. It was phenomenal stuff. So talk to us a bit about that game and how you addressed the Haaland issue, because he was a genuine threat in that tournament.
He was. I knew a lot about him before we got into the tournament because he'd actually just made his move for, I think it was nearly 10 million euros before. And I mean, you can go one of two ways about these things. You can either talk other teams up or talk other players up, or you can spend time reiterating what we're going to do and how we're going to go about doing what we do. And what was really good, actually, within our group, we had Chris James, the All-White, who come as sort of an observer, he was trying to go down his coaching pathway. And Chris had actually shared a message with me that he'd been on previous camps or in previous tours where everything that he'd seen, he was really happy with in terms of how things had gone. He said, but what used to really frustrate him was the final team meeting. Although we'd said everything, not us personally, but the environments he'd been in, the last message was always then about the opposition. Be careful of this, be careful of this, and so on. So we actually had a sort of a rule within our environment, which was 80% us, 20% opposition. And all that meant was whenever we presented, whenever we were on the field, it was about 80% what we're going to do, whilst also 20% of we need to prepare the players for what they may face, but we're not going to build the players up or the opposition up, because I think sometimes you can scare players and take the attention away from actually what we want to go and what we think we're capable of going to do. So we made him aware of Haaland and his strengths, but it wasn't anything too in-depth. And then the players went out and performed an excellent game plan.
Under 23s, obviously you take that core squad in Poland 2019 through Olympic qualifying, you're off to the games, but you're denied the opportunity to go. Obviously, there's the postponement of the games last year because of COVID-19, and then your contract isn't renewed. How do you feel about that situation now? We're a year or so removed from it. Do you still harbour ill will towards New Zealand football, or have you sort of buried the hatchet and moved on from it? Because I think, openly speaking, you would have done magical things with that squad if you were given the chance to go to Tokyo. So how are you feeling about the whole thing?
I'm still disappointed with it, and I'm disappointed because over a 2.5 year period that incorporated the 19s, then the 20s, and then the 23s, I felt that we were really building something, and people were really starting to see, not just the on-field performances, but I talk about that identity and that culture work. People were actually starting to really notice that as well, and they were comments that were being passed back to us. And the under-23s, when we went to the islands, there'd been a lot of reason or excuses made before about playing a different style of football because of the heat or the pitch. Whereas actually we went to the Olympic qualifiers and continued to probably play better than what people see at the 20s World Cup with that playing group on the same pitch in that heat. So it was actually sticking true to who we were. And yeah, the under 23s, we actually left unbeaten after 12 games. We won a Pacific gold medal. So yeah, it was disappointing in that respect to not be able to continue that journey with that playing group. And then probably just disappointing how it all ended up unraveling, which was around, not even being able to enter some kind of negotiation as to could we make it work or could it work. That was probably the disappointing thing for me, but no ill will. I said we entered this football world, it's very crazy, especially from a coaching point of view, and things change. And I truly wish them well when they do go to Tokyo this year. And again, for me, the football journey's continued, and I've been fortunate to end up in Melbourne under the City Football Group to be successful this year. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's not bad, but I mean, it could have been really cool with that young playing roster, Des. I mean, did they get in touch with you, a number of the players, and say, look, we're really disappointed that you're not going to be involved when the Olympics eventually gets underway?
I had a lot of messages from a lot of players, people around the country, which at the time were and still are hugely appreciated. Like I said, I've got a large part of my heart that is still in New Zealand, and there's a lot of people that I care for still there. So to actually have to leave the country, that was the one thing that got me, was having to leave the country, because I truly thought I'd be there for many more years. But no, the players all reached out, and so did the staff, and that meant a lot and still does. And I still, like I said, that's part of the reason I still keep in contact with it, pretty much everybody.
Where does it all begin for you? You've been coaching for a long time. You're in your mid-30s, but basically half your life has been devoted, and you've dedicated yourself to the craft of football managing or coaching. Why and where did it start? Because usually the progression is, okay, I'm playing, I figure out I can't play for whatever reason, and then I get into the coaching sphere. But you were there as a teenager. So how did it all happen for you?
I crossed paths with a person called Mickey Lewis. And Mickey Lewis, unfortunately, is no longer with us. He passed earlier this year, who was a youth team coach at Oxford United. And his mannerisms, the way he went about coaching, just grabbed me. And I was fascinated with how he went about what he did and how he was able to relate and engage with people, let alone coach football. So I tagged on to him for the large part of my early career, both in the youth team and in the academy at Oxford. And then again, stayed good friends with him all the way through. So that was the first stage. That took me on a 10-year journey at Oxford. Ended up working in the first team then under Chris Wilder and with Mickey. Before I jumped across to New Zealand in Wellington for 2.5 years, then back to Stoke for a year, and then back to New Zealand for the 2.5 years again in Auckland with the national teams.
All over the place. What was that time like with Chris Wilder? Because he's a Premier League coach, although he's lost his job just recently with Sheffield United. He's been linked to West Bromwich Albion as well. But I remember reading a piece where your time spent with him, it helped frame what kind of coach you wanted to be. So what was that experience like with him?
Yeah, I've been fortunate on my football journey so far to work under some excellent, or work with and under some excellent head coaches or coaches. So Chris Wilder was one, Paul Lambert, Mark Hughes. I even had the luxury of Ernie Merrick when I arrived into Wellington, and they're all very different people and have all got very good different skill sets. So to be able to see different ways of working has certainly helped me. But for Chris, it was obviously his football knowledge was excellent, but it was more his man management and how he was able to really relate to the people he worked with, and be really brutally honest at times with them. And they loved him for it. And he was able to make what I see and still see at times something that was very complex, very simple in his messaging. And it's no surprise to see the success that he certainly went on to have with Sheffield United. Are
you the kind of person who sets goals short and long term? And if so, where do you eventually want to be with your coaching career?
Yeah, I think you can. I think you can set goals. For me, it's about, the biggest thing for me, it's about putting myself in a position where on a continual basis, I've got the opportunity to learn. And that's certainly the attraction behind coming to Melbourne as an assistant coach, because Melbourne is owned by the City Football Group. And what comes with that, for me personally, is a real development plan on my own coaching, from the raft of things that are available to me that wouldn't be at any other A-League club. So that for me is huge. Because I want to go back into being a head coach at some point in the near future. And all I'm doing right now is trying to make sure I talk about that toolbox, is try and recognise what I might need, knowing full well that I've had the opportunity to lead the Phoenix. I've had the opportunity with national teams to be the head coach, and I've actually had 3 opportunities again this season while the coach has been sick or injured to take the team on 3 occasions. So it's now knowing what I think I need and making sure that in these environments I can continue to try and better myself for when the next opportunity does come.
Thank you so much for your time today on the Kiwi Football Fix. We're very proud of you and what you've done with both the Wellington Phoenix and our age group sides, and what you're continuing to do with Melbourne City in the A-League. Go well. Congratulations on the Premier's plate. And he is hoping that it's the Wellington Phoenix up against your Melbourne City in the A-League Grand Final in a few weeks' time. Des, thank you so much for joining us, mate.
Absolute pleasure, Goran. Thank you for having me.
Oh, so good to catch up with Des Buckingham here on the Kiwi Football Fix. Just before I go, remember the Wellington Phoenix back in New Zealand this weekend. Sunday they're at Eden Park up against Perth Glory. Coverage gets underway at 3:15 on Sky Sports 7. Make sure you check that out, and we'll check you again on the Kiwi Football Fix same time next week. Thanks for your time.